Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Demystifying AI podcast,
Experience?
the Demystifying AI experience.
Hello.
Amy, well, welcome back. You and Kim are swapping, have been
Yes,
swapping places in the last few
we're never seen in the same place at the same time,
Are
so
they the
it's
same
quite.
person? Is one of them AI generated?
That's right.
These are the questions that we must ask ourselves. I thought it might be helpful to pick up a little bit where we left off last time. Kim and I were sharing some use cases for ChatGPT or for your favorite AI chatbot. And the one that I mentioned, a use that I had for ChatGPT recently that was that I found quite helpful was working on it to refine a strategy. So we made brief mention of the fact that Radical Candor is going to be launching its own community. So this is going to be a community for people who are aspiring or experienced leaders that want to learn from their peers as well as from experts like Kim about how to apply Radical Candor to their everyday leadership challenges. And it's quite a lot of work to launch a community. And one thing that's really helpful is to have a well-developed strategy for launching the community. And I'll admit, like, this is not something I'd done before, and I've had to learn a lot about this. And one of the ways that I've been learning about this is by collaborating essentially with my AI buddy. So I'll just show really
Have you
quickly.
named your AI buddy, Jason, as you're pulling that up?
I have not. It's just okay. ChatGPT 4.0. So here, okay. let me present my screen. Oh, interesting. This is the easiest way I can think of to show this, but it won't show, we can't do audio. So one of the things that's really helpful, like I think a lot of the times when people are using some of these tools, they tend to start a new chat every single time that they go in, and they're like, hey, I've got this new question. And this was a case where I wanted to keep a very long running history so that the tool had a lot of context for me and could help me develop the strategy over time. And I wanted to encourage people to think of this as, like, I started to think of these conversations more like workbooks. So I have like some that are related to images that I want to generate and some that are related to strategy stuff that I'm doing. And I'm treating each of the conversations as kind of a workbook where I'm building up context over time in order to make the bot more and more helpful to me.
Jason, I just before you go into the details, I don't know if it's any way to make it a little bigger on the copy, but I think I can get the general gist. Jay has a question. If you have any thoughts about using ChatGPT versus an AI consolidator like Perplexity?
Great question from Jay. I'll stop my screen for a moment and answer the question, and then we can get back to like how to use this as a workbook. So from my perspective,
and for those of us who are perplexed by the name Perplexity, if you want to give a little context.
It's sort of like an AI search engine is probably the best, like, simple context that I can give on it. Jay, feel free to feel free to correct us if you think about it differently. His description as like AI consolidator is a reasonable description also, but I think the model, the mental model that most people have when they use it is like, this is another search engine. Here's my 2 cents on that. I think there's one of the reasons why it's interesting is because each of the model has certain sort of default behaviors and maybe even limitations that may or may not work for the particular application that you have. For example, Brandy, who normally hosts this, but is under the knife at the dentist at the moment, and asked us to jump on and get this going technically on her own. When she's writing long form content, she most prefers to use Claude. Like, she finds that Claude tends to understand both the sort of like style, like her style a little bit better, and what she's looking for long form content, um, than OpenAI does, or than Gemini does. So because those things exist, I think AI aggregators probably will, or consolidators will probably continue to have a place in the world if you don't really want to think about that stuff. But what I've started to realize is that I've shifted away from sort of like general uses of AI. Like, I don't like asking AI broad questions necessarily, because I don't really trust the answers that I get back. If you watched our episode a few weeks ago, there's a really great paper out there that describes that how, even though someone in the industry decided to call AI making stuff up hallucinating, which makes it seem like it had the right idea, but then it sort of got this crazy idea, and it decided to say the crazy idea. And what the paper says is like, no, it was always BSing you, like the entire time, because there's no conception of truth or non-truth. And so I think like AI as a search tool, I don't think we found, I haven't seen a great application of that yet. And I've stopped using it in that way because I don't find it particularly useful or trustworthy. And I want something that's going to more easily take me to firsthand sources when I'm looking for information about stuff.
I just want to say you got a like on that one, Jason. So
Okay, good.
the crowd is with you.
Yeah, that's all. And so what am I using AI for? I tend to have like purpose-driven uses of AI now. I sort of have projects that I'm using AI for. And one of the advantages of using one of the, like going a level down and using one of the chatbots, is that they all now have the ability to customize those bots. So I can give context to that bot. I can build up some history with it. I can give custom instructions to the bot. And I'm sure that there may even be ways to do this with Perplexity, but I found that I now have like a set of these sort of predefined workspaces with some rules built into them that work reasonably well for me. And so I've shifted away from this sort of like general query use case toward more specific direct like project work inside of GPT. And that might be, some of my projects are coding, and some of them are document writing, and some of them are like sort of refining text or something like that.
Cool. So, and then Jason, if you want to, like, I'm curious, as you pull back up the workbook, like when you were just saying that you've, built some kind of institutional knowledge there for Chat GPT. So are you saying that all the items on the side, it's answering your question, not just from your current query, but from your history with it?
Right. So let me show you what I mean. The So I might be, let me try to make the text a little bit bigger. Here we go.
Oh, that's great.
So here's an example. So I asked it this general question, which is like, what does the structure of a community strategy look like for, we're building one around radicalcandor.com. I was just trying to get an idea of like what its high level outline for something like that might look like. And then I said, let me give you some background and goals about like what we're actually trying to do. And I want to give you some context. So I sent it this thing that describes in detail Radical Candor's service, product and service offerings. This is our services overview. It's, if anybody submits a query to us, you'll get a copy of this, so you can see it for yourself. But my intention here was actually to build up its knowledge, not just the general knowledge, but the specific knowledge about our business.
I just have to say, I'm kind of fascinated that it can integrate a PDF. Like even that is news to me. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, I like the more context you can give, the better, the happier chat GPT is, or maybe a better way to say it is like the more accurate the answers are that you're likely to get. So it took, like, what it did was it took this sort of background information that I had plus the context in the PDF, and it rewrote the strategy for me. And I don't, the rest of this is the conversation history of this sort of looks boring, right? Which is like, I'm saying this and then it's saying that, and then I'm saying something. But what might not be obvious is one of the ways that I was actually doing this was I was I was talking to it. So instead of like typing out all my instructions, I started to like have a conversation with the AI. And this was really interesting. Like, I had to give it some instructions. So one of the things that it did was it liked to read its in full response. So every time it rewrote the the strategy based on my input, then it would read me its entire answer, which was very, it's not a very fluid conversation when the AI is reading you an entire strategy document every single time that you talk to it. So I had to give it some instructions like, hey, don't do that. Instead, like, write out the entire thing for me to read it later, but give me a quick summary of what you've changed. And over time, this workbook got better and better at making it easier and easier for me to interact with the strategy and refine it with AI's help. And then eventually, when we get all the way down to the bottom, I had a strategy that I was like pretty happy with, and then I decided what I wanted to do was I built a new chat specifically to help me refine that strategy. And what I added as context at the top was the strategy that the other chat had outputted for me.
And Jason, how did you add what? So you just
I just
copy
copied and
pasted
pasted
it?
it. Yep.
Uh-huh.
I basically said here, and I explained like here, it says right here, memory updated. And that's basically what that's I gave it, I
Here's the
put something
strategy
into its
so far.
memory. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep. And now I
So,
have to
so
like,
had you not done that, it wouldn't have pulled from your previous conversation,
correct,
unless,
conversations don't know
yeah,
anything about one another. That's
yeah.
right. Yep. You have to do that. Uh, but this is like, anybody can do this. It doesn't matter what you're developing. Even if you're thinking of like, oh, I want to make a plan for my garden, and you're thinking of like, there's the bed in the front, and what do I want to do in there, and there's the stuff on the side. You could use ChatGPT. You could ask it questions like, hey, this is the area of the country that I live in. What are the native plants in my area? You could tell it your goals for gardening, and you can have it make some suggestions about what to put in there. But eventually it could give you a list, and it could say, like, what you could be working towards is, okay, so I want, blueberry bushes in the side garden. Those happen to be native to the Northeast. I'm living in Connecticut. Blueberry bushes grow really well here. And then I want, some native succulents, which it doesn't seem like New England should have native succulents, but it does, in fact, have native succulents. And you can work on and refine that. And then at some point you can pull it out of ChatGPT and you can put it in an email, or you can put it in a spreadsheet or wherever else that you want to use it. But this idea, like, one of the hardest parts, I think, of working solo on a project is you don't really have a thought partner or someone who's sort of kind of like keeping track of the ideas that you're coming up with. And I found that to be a really useful, powerful use of ChatGPT. Is like, I use it a bit like an outboard brain, and I dump
Hmm.
some context into it, and then it helps me to sort of synthesize and summarize that context.
Yeah, you had mentioned that last time when I watched the replay, and I was really curious about that, especially doing research on some projects myself. And I was wondering, Jason, do you, for the sort of outward brain, like, are you saying, hey, ChatGPT, could you keep a list of all these links or all these reference materials? Like, are you instructing it like anytime? I'm just thinking of like this versus an Evernote or some tool like that, or, where you might be keeping articles. Like, how would you do this differently in ChatGPT than a sort of um, Clipper or Note service?
Yeah, I'm not really using it any differently. In fact, there are some note services that do that have essentially the same functionality as what I'm using this for. Notion
Yeah.
which is sort of like a fancy notebook that does, I mean, it does a whole lot of other stuff. But they've introduced an AI that lives on top of Notion that allows you to do this exact same thing. So you can like gather information together, and then you can ask the Notion AI to like help you synthesize the information inside of a particular notebook or node inside your Notion site. So you can use other people are definitely implementing this, but the way I use it is I don't, I'm taking context and just dropping it in. So if it's a web link, sometimes I'll just like print a PDF of it and drop the PDF in there. Like if I want to get at the article content. Yeah.
Gotcha. And I don't know if we've talked about this before, but as you were sharing about the strategy and the blueberry bushes and which
Yeah.
feels very seasonal, I was wondering, like, have you used this at all for OKRs and as a way for leaders to kind of think about objectives and key results?
Uh, oh, I haven't really used it for that purpose. What was in your mind there?
I was just wondering, like, it because when we've gone through OKR exercises together, sometimes the objectives and then the key results get a little mixed up, right? So sometimes it's not clear, sort of the hierarchy of like what's the objective and what's the key result, and how do all these things relate together. So I wonder if there's some synthesizing of, as a team exercise, which we've currently done more through like a Miro or sort of each person doing their own version of it versus could AI sort of consolidate and look at all of the different like individual like results or projects that people are looking at and then kind of bubble up into some common objectives that might not be as obvious to us humans.
I think you'd have to teach it to do that. I don't think it'll have some ideas for how to do that, but my guess is that you're going to be pretty disappointed with the default output that you get from asking it questions about those things. And that's because like in some ways the structured data that it is best at dealing with is human language. And so when you layer on another construct like OKRs and like the implicit relational meanings between an objective and a key result, it can do that kind of sort of reasoning. But my guess is that you have some very specific ideas of like how to interpret the inputs into that, and like what kind of output would actually be useful. And that's the place where you're going to have to do some custom instructions to make it useful.
Gotcha. Well, we'll see if
Another way to
that will
say that is
shift.
you have to think about the
Yeah,
prompt that you're writing. Like your prompt has to be quite specific in order to get the useful data back out of it.
it's all about the prompt.
It is.
All right.
Well,
Any
I can't
anything
help but
more
notice
burning?
we
We're
have
speaking to an empty room.
yes. So this really was a podcast. The no, nothing else burning for today. I would say it the thing that we were talking about last week, the sort of like AI bubble and what's happening economically, and is like this actually having the impact that people thought it would, that like made its way into the like sort of corporate mainstream media this week. Like there were like it started to make it out into I think it was Forbes had an article on it or something like that. Like it's sort of it's definitely like that thing is floating around out there. And I will say anecdotally, I'm in touch with a handful of people who are either founders or investors in AI startups, and there's like a little bit of a pessimistic vibe starting to like creep in. There's a lot of people who are trying to raise money and can't. Uh, like they're not getting a second round of funding or financing, and in my mind, I've said this, I tend to be like a pretty big AI enthusiast, and thinking especially its ability to create a new kind of interface for computing, like that from my perspective, this ability to like a natural language interface for computing. Um, uh, but I think maybe another way to say this is the optimist way to say this is that a lot of the ways that people have conceived of using at least this generation of especially large language models is pretty trite. It's like very trivial uses. Um, and if AI is going to like have a big impact on computing and like human interactions with computers and that type of stuff, I think we need to see some more substantial versions of this. Although Kim shared last time that she like her favorite thing was like they asked what the routing number was for her bank account and it was able to find that for them automatically. Like I don't want to. That is like simple but not trite. Right, because like it's a real human endeavor to like search for that information and like and find it, and knowing it was specific to your account and all this other stuff. So I want to distinguish between like simple isn't bad, but trite is sort of bad. I do like
So
the
Jason,
in the
just
new.
to like when you
Yeah,
say
please.
trite, are you saying like trivial in the sense like that not only gave Kim joy, but it actually took away something that was a hard task for her and saved her time and like emotional
Exactly.
angst?
That is an example of like improving the computing interface. To me, that's an example of like AI filling the human language, becoming the human language interface to computers. Um, I think the I think the like AI search is an interesting example. Going back to the question that Jay asked at the very beginning, AI search is an interesting example because it's like we already have search with natural language. Like, how is AI making it better? Because in some cases, it's making it demonstrably worse. Um, like for on both sides, both in terms of like the direct output that the search engines give, whether it be Perplexity or Google or whoever is implementing the AI part, and AI is making it easier to put garbage on the internet. So like, I actually think that like net the impact on search, the AI's impact on search so far has been negative. It's gotten worse. Um, uh, and I think that's because people are the current endeavors maybe are oversimple like are maybe oversimplifying what is actually needed in order to make a step change improvement in the search experience, because you could already put a query in natural language into every search engine, right? You didn't have to frame your question, you know, you didn't have to put code in order for a search to like find you the results that you were looking for before. So like the question is, what is AI adding in those spaces? And right now I think the answer is not only is it not adding something, it seems to be taking something away. And so I think that's like the source of some of the pessimism, is that people are building applications that are sort of trivially layering AI on top of what used to be there before. And not only is it not enhancing it, but it's sort of making it awkwardly worse, or harder to navigate, or more confusing to use, or less trustworthy. Um, so I, I just wanted to acknowledge that, like, I think we're going to see more of that conversation happening in popular press over the next 6 months. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's good.
Yeah.
Like we should be putting some pressure on entrepreneurs who are trying to use this technology to like use it to do something good and helpful for people.
Before we close, Jason, I was curious as you were talking if you like looked into your crystal ball, if we are at July 18, 2024, like there's it's like a two-part question. One is how long from the way things are adapting so rapidly till it becomes like not so trivial. And the corollary is like what's a product, like what's an example of something that you're like, wow, that would have a huge value to it. Do you have any ideas on that?
I don't know exactly how long. I think what's sort of surprising to me is that in the last 3 years, like every 6 months, it was like, oh wow, we're like entering a new phase. And I think we're seeing some of that now with new modality, like new output modalities. So like we have some AIs that can produce video, for example, and that's sort of interesting, and it might have some unknown impact. Like there might be some unknown impacts as a result of that. Um, but I actually think that my experience, my anecdotal experience with the large language models producing text output, is that we've hit a pretty hard plateau in their improvement in the last 6 months. Like uh, there's some features that they've added, like the ability to like interpret images and stuff like that, which is interesting. But the actual quality of the output has plateaued hard for me. Like I have not seen
Mm.
any significant improvement in the quality of the output, and some of the same errors that I saw 6 months ago. Um, AI repeating itself, for example, like that's like a really common thing. It becomes very verbose simply by repeating things that it's already said. Um, uh, that problem hasn't gone away. And so like I think that's sort of an interesting observation because I think a year ago, everybody was saying a year from now, you won't even be able to recognize the AI output that we're getting. And it's like, nah, I'm not quite feeling that actually as a like as an end user. I'm not feeling that where I am seeing it is like in highly specialized applications. So you're asking like where could things be very
Hmm.
different? I think um, I think AI has the ability to make accessible like medical research in a way that it hasn't been accessible before. I think that's a highly specialized application that could have serious positive implications. Imagine places that didn't have the best computer systems available to them. AI is making it much cheaper to make a great, research explorer than we've ever had before. So I think that's like a potential. Those uses are happening already, and I think they're going to continue to get better and more easily accessible and less expensive. And I think they have the potential of like propelling humanity forward by making it so that we don't literally have to make the same mistake over and over again. Like research the same uh, like complete the same failed experiment over and over again. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Uh, so that's exciting to me. And I mean, the experiment that we're doing, I think, is pretty interesting, which is like, how do you take a body of knowledge like the one that we've built up around radical candor and then build a bot on top of that, like use large language models and some bot infrastructure to make it easy to scalably consistently reproduce high quality answers similar to what Kim might have said if you asked her something about radical candor. And I think that we're seeing some promising signs that it's within reach not to do a perfect facsimile of Kim, but to do a very good
Facsimile.
a very good facsimile, which is pretty exciting.
Really exciting. Well, I'm leaving this session feeling really hopeful, and as always, appreciate you guiding us through.
My pleasure. And to anyone still watching, we're glad you were here as well. Thank you for joining
Thanks for
us. We'll
joining.
see you next
Take
time.
care. Bye
Bye.
bye.